Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk. Today, we will be discussing bad follow spot operators, creating a text analysis class, maintaining your designs, dead-end teaching gigs, and making design suggestions to your collaborators, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. Now, if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Welcome, everyone, to episode 324. And yes, there are only two of us today. For people saying, wait, we normally have three people, sometimes we have four people, sometimes we have six people. Today we have two of the originals because unfortunately Stan is having computer problems.
That's right, no muffins today, just a stale bun.
But anyway, hey, it's great to be back. I've been gone for a while. And I just want to tell you, Steve, I listened to last week's show and it was fabulous.
It was only like 3 hours.
It was an hour and 32 minutes long that we cut down to about 42 minutes.
Thank God.
Thank God that we cut that thing down. But there's some really good discussions about the unions. I thought that was really super interesting. And a funny little thing between who was correct on a Groucho Marx quote. Was it Stan or was it Ellen? And as it turns out, they both were correct. It was actually a quote that was from Annie Hall. Stan quoted Woody Allen as saying, I would never be a member of the club that would have me as a member, or join a club that would have me as a member. And then Ellen said, well, that was a Groucho Marx quote. And actually, they were both correct because Woody Allen did say that quote, but he credited Groucho Marx in the movie. He basically said, as Groucho Marx said, so they were both correct. So,
well, enough of this nonsense. I want to hear the dirt. How was your vacation?
Oh, it was awesome. And it wasn't really totally a vacation. It was like a research trip because I had never seen this level of
margaritas.
Margaritas, yeah. Actually, the drinks sucked, by the way. Lori and I looked at each other and said, hey, do we want an unlimited drink package? And we discovered that if we paid for the unlimited drinks, we would each have to drink 9 drinks a day just to break even. Now, let me tell you something. I know some people do that. Like the guitar player in one of my bands, he does that. He actually can drink, him and his wife can drink like 30 drinks a day. They're just one of these people. But I can't do it. Right.
Well, okay, so, hang on. 9 drinks a day. How many days were you on a cruise?
8 days.
8 days. Okay. Well, will they let you, take those drinks off in a Tupperware?
No. I don't know if you'd want to take those drinks off in a Tupperware, to tell you the truth. But yeah, it's not a really good deal because Lori and I drank 2, maybe at the most 3 drinks a day. Between the two of us, I'm talking about. So, yeah, we're lightweights. We're totally lightweights. So it was crazy. But what was really cool was that this was an Oasis level ship, and the ship is about 20 years old, but it was like one of the first super-sized ships that hold like 5,000 passengers. And the one thing we learned really quickly was, we don't like ships with 5,000 passengers. It's really super crowded. It was totally nuts.
It can't be. I mean, 5,000 is not that many. I see the ads for these. It's always you and your lover sitting by the swimming pool by yourselves.
With about 8,000 kids.
It's always you and your lover having a hot tub by yourselves.
Well, the problem was, and we figured this out, actually Lori figured it out, was that they were having a sale that if you go with your husband or wife, you can bring as many kids as you want for free.
Do they have to be related to you?
Yes, they had to be related to you. But you could stack 17 kids in your stateroom, right? I mean, it would be totally insane, but you could do that. And that's what a lot of people did. Because the ship went out of Galveston, a lot of people from Texas were on the ship, Oklahoma, around that area, so they don't have to pay for any plane fares. They just drive down there, right? It's actually cheaper for them to pay for this cruise and feed their kids for free, right? All the food is free, than actually pay for the food back in Oklahoma or Texas or wherever they're from. So we had a lot of Texans on board. And that proved to be very interesting. And we just decided it was just not really our demographic. Nothing against Texans. I love Texans. You are from Texas. I spent a lot of my life in Texas. But there was family and a lot of family people, and it was just not our cup of tea.
Well, maybe they needed the drink package.
I think they all had it.
You and your husband and your 17 kids have a drink package.
I think the kids needed Xanax. They just needed all to be on Xanax and let them sleep all day long. But it was one of those crazy, crazy trips because of that. But it's kind of a research thing for me because the theaters there and the shows were all like state of the art. It was really, really interesting to see this, which actually brings up a lot of topics that we're going to talk about in the show today. There are a lot of issues when you're designing for cruise ships that we're going to talk about. But let's talk, first of all, great entertainment. There was a production of Mamma Mia with a terrific cast and design team. And apparently this production of Mamma Mia has been on this cruise line for, I don't know, about 15 years or so. It's been around. There was an amazing aqua show, which was rigged by our good friend Eric Rouse. You know Eric.
Yeah.
And he's doing another one of their new ships. This is Royal Caribbean, by the way. One of their new ships that's leaving out of Barcelona. We met a lot of musicians on this ship because the musicianship was amazing. And, you know, there were great jazz singers, blues singers, great pianists, great guitar players, great horn players, great arrangers. And we made friends with the blues band and jazz band. And we saw them several times and talked to them, and it was fabulous. These musicians, they signed like these 8-month contracts. They were talking about, I asked them, so what, were you stuck in a room all day? Because they play 3 hours a day. They have 1 hour of rehearsal and 3 hours of performance a day. So we asked them, so what is it like? I mean, do you have freedom to go about the ship? And they said, yeah, absolutely. They can go to the restaurants, they can go into swimming pools. There are only 2 things they can't do that they're forbidden to do. And one of them is to go into jacuzzis, which I find kind of interesting. And the other one is to have sexual relationships with any passengers. They're not allowed to do that, which is a good thing. You know, no matter what, you should never do anything like that. But those are the 2 rules.
Well, see, that's why the jacuzzi's off limits, because once you hit the jacuzzi with your 9-drink serving tray, then all bets are off.
You'll sleep with anyone. At that point, it's like there's that 800-pound Texan there. Yeah, I'll sleep with him. I don't care. You know, at this point, it doesn't matter. I can't see anyway. That being said, we met the musical director for Mamma Mia, and this is, believe it or not, a 24-year-old young man who was an amazing musician. He also played some fun bar gigs, and, we were sitting right next to the piano with him, and we got to know him. And he's leaving Mamma Mia to go to this brand new ship that Eric's on in Barcelona. And that's going to be, he's doing a production of Hairspray as a musical director. But just getting back to the entertainment for a second. So there's the Mamma Mia show. There was an amazing aqua show, a very entertaining and professional ice show, which was in a really cool thrust theater with very low lighting positions, some very mediocre comedy, and to my surprise, many great musicians and entertainers, as I just said. And again, this is a state-of-the-art ship. The venues were well equipped with video, lighting, and sound. But there were some technical issues that may have been due to the difficulty of maintenance on the ship or just due to the nature of producing shows on the ship. So the big show of the cruise was Mamma Mia. We saw the first night. It was a pretty good sign of what the rest of the week's entertainment would be like. First, I want to be clear that the performers, musicians, and the lighting design was very good. I believe the lighting designer was Howard Harrison. I know he did the original cruise production of this on this line. I don't know if he did this later one or the move. But the design displayed a beautiful use of color, layering, great cueing, and some very beautiful atmospheres. Unfortunately, and I hate to say this because I know how hard these people work, but the crew, especially the follow spot operators, were pretty much destroying it. First of all, we talked about maintenance. One light had a broken gobo rotator, meaning that they had this effect, this water effect on an upstage building, which was all white. And he was doing a water effect, and one of the rotating gobos got stuck every 2 seconds and returned to its starting position. It was not very good. There was some uneven gobo focusing, which could have easily been corrected when the light first came up by the board op, unless the focus module was screwed up in the light, who knows? And lights that were shaking throughout the entire show. And this was in a beautiful, huge theater. I think a lot of this had to do with the vibration of the ship. I don't think they've adequately insulate the vibration. I don't think they adequately did that because these lights, even just a little vibration will cause a really noticeable shake on stage, especially when you're projecting like gobos on a white building, And there's nothing more distracting than doing a dramatic scene, or any scene for that matter, having gobo shaking, upstage of it, like 10 feet upstage of the actors. And I think that was really kind of weird. I know that, since there are so many lights doing it, I assume it was the vibration. We had terrible foul spot work, actors talking in the dark, spots hitting upstage white walls, spots hitting the borders, pickups that started on the borders, then came down to the actor. It looked like they used the waiters from the steak restaurant to run foul spots. It really did. And they may have done that. Who knows? Maybe a foul spot operator was sick and they had to pull somebody who didn't know the show. That's what it looked like. And this show's been running for years. I was just really, really surprised.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean, though, doesn't have to be the waiter from the restaurant. Maybe that's the first day on board for that follow spot operator, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know on the ice show, we actually saw the ice show was so good, we saw it twice. We saw the ice show twice, and we saw the aqua show twice because they were phenomenal shows. And Lori was really impressed with them, and I was too, and we just went back to see him. And on the second night of that we saw the same show, the ice show, they had 4 follow spots. So it was like a thrust type of situation. And they were low. They were only up on stands about 10 feet high. So that was fine for the ice show, no problem. But on that second show, they had 2 follow spot operators on 2 of the follow spots. So I think they were training them. And they did a very good job. I must say they did a good job. Not as good as the ones that we saw the first night. So I think they're constantly training people. The problem is that on a show like Mamma Mia, where there are dramatic scenes in that show, and you have follow spots like doing a pickup and it hits the second row of the audience, that's a problem. I mean, I was always told, if you're going to miss on a follow spot, aim low, like aim at the stage and then work your way up. Don't aim high like most of these, follow spots are doing, hitting the board and then coming down. That's a bad thing. But they were aiming so low, they were in the second row of the audience. So that's not, aim low, but not that low, okay? So anyway, it was kind of crazy, and we're going to be talking about maintaining shows later during Let's Talk About, but that was sort of the thing there. So it's great to be back. Lori and I head out to Prague in a couple of days with a quadrennial, and that we're really excited about that. So, yeah, it's good to be back, even though it's for like a week.
Well, welcome back, man. You were missed.
Oh, man. Thank you so much. It was, I don't know if I like traveling that much anymore, to tell you the truth. The cruise should be very easy. I think this next week is going to be a little test for me after a 14-hour flight, but we shall see.
Yeah, Jay's going to be there. Kip Marsh is going to be there.
That's
Luther's
right.
going to be there. There's a bunch of our friends there.
A lot of our friends are there, and I'm really excited that we're going. I've never done the quadrennial, and I've wanted to do it for like 30 years, but I was always working in the summer. But since this summer I'm not doing Central City anymore,
right.
I can do it. I can have some fun, so that's what we're going to do. So anyway, let's get started with the show. Steve, you have our first question.
Sure, it comes from Charles in Louisiana. And Chuck says, how do you decide to jump in and offer suggestions to the other designers? Well, I look at the stage and it looks really bad. There are bad things happening. Charles, what I try to do is I have to tell you, I try not to jump in. I try to do that during all the pre-production stuff leading up to it. Because if I'm having to jump in during tech or dress, there's bigger problems than, the color the floor is painted. But either way, I try to treat people with dignity, and I want to listen to what they have to say, and I try to put myself in their position. And the main thing is I listen very carefully before I jump in and just start offering suggestions, particularly if there's a problem and all I have to offer is the obvious solution that we can't do, like, well, just rebuild the second act. I think if you do offer suggestions to the other designers, it needs to be something that's achievable. And again, I'm assuming the show's not a disaster, so let's take that off the table. They've all been working with the director for months, so everybody, the little ship is sailing in the same direction. So I don't want to jump in there and say, oh, well, any more than I would want someone to jump in and say, well, your red site sucks. It needs to be blue. Well, we've been talking about a red site for 6 months. So I try to stay in the world that you're trying to create. David, How do you do it? Opera seems like the perfect world for lots of suggestions.
Well, we usually get suggestions from audience members, like, who's in charge of this? Who's to blame? No.
Oh, I had one of those where an usher came and got me. I was in Germany, and a little lady wanted to know who the lighting designer was, and she was very upset.
Yeah. I had a little old lady, too, attack me at La Scala, but it was not about the lighting. She thought I was the director, and I just said, no, the director's the guy to my left here. Talk to him. That happens. But all those are very good suggestions, Steve. I just want to add one thing. It depends on who the director is, because chances are that if there's something wrong on stage, whether it be with lighting, costume, sound, projections, or anything, makeup, the director will notice it immediately. And the director will already have talked to that designer, usually privately. It's different if you have a weak director. I don't work with weak directors anymore. I work with and have for a long time worked with strong directors. That director will know what the direction of the show needs to be going in, visually and sonically, and they will keep it on track. And the designers are usually good enough that there's no issue. In the profession, that's usually the case, that people are pretty competent. And if there's a situation where someone goes way off track, then the director will talk to them. But if the director doesn't talk to them for some reason, maybe the director is too busy dealing with some acting issues, then yeah, you could, if you've got a close relationship with that colleague, you should talk to them about it and say, I may be able to help you out with this, or how can I help you out? That's one of the things you say and do. And you're sincere, say, what can I do to make your job easier? What can I do to help you? And as a lighting designer, you could do a lot of things. But if it's a problem with the costume or whatever, I usually allow the director to deal with that.
I had a good friend who was a costume designer early in my career who came up to me and said, I think the show's just a little too cool and a little too blue. And, I said, well, I'll think about that for a while. And she went, no, it really is too blue and too cool. I said, okay, let me take that note. And then she said, no, put these on. And she gave me a pair of sunglasses. And the show looked a hell of a lot better. So I was in the midst of lighting Dracula with my good friend Gwen Biddix, and she was a woman on a mission. Those costumes were not looking the way she wanted them to look, and it was a good education for me. And she had a good point.
Yeah, it is good, and that you should have that collaborative freedom because that's really what it's all about, is teamwork. I know that when I play music and I make a mistake. No one tells me I made a mistake because they know I made the mistake.
I think that's the big dark secret. Everyone knows that they made a mistake.
The key is correcting it. So there you go.
Well, it looks like you have the next question.
Yes, I do. And this is from Anonymous in a Southern state. That's exactly how it's signed. Anonymous in a Southern state. I am a new tech design faculty member at, well, let's just say a Southern university, and I'm really concerned that the expectations for advancement and tenure in the system is an impossible task. For instance, they require excellent student reviews, an enormous amount of committee work, production supervision, and a rigorous professional career designing at Lort Theaters or better. Is this possible? Should I be worried? Well, Anonymous, what you have hit is what I call the professional educational catch-22. So Steve will tell you more about that in a second, but it is a real thing that happens, not necessarily only at Southern universities. It happens in a lot of places throughout the country. We know stories of things like this happening in liberal states, and there may be a more conservative university, and just people who don't realize what they really want in a faculty member, especially a design tech faculty member, because, if they expect you to have a career, right, and a successful one. I consider people who work in Lort Theaters pretty successful already. That means, they're working with professional directors and at a certain level of accomplishment. I think that's really important. And not only teach, but do the type of supervision that's required when you have students designing. That means your weekends are shot, right? It's a catch-22. It's almost impossible to do that. So what you have to do, two things. If it's obviously a situation where, if you look at the history and a lot of the professors have not been tenured, they haven't been promoted because of this, then you know this is going to be a dead-end job. And you can either continue in the job knowing that and looking for other jobs, because right now, let's be honest, it's tough out there. It's maybe more difficult now than it's ever been to be a professional designer and to live and have a family and live and earn enough money. So teaching jobs allow you that. They get, it gives you a supplemental income, plus it gives you health insurance and things like that, and retirement. So that's very important, and it's enabled Steve, Stan, and myself to actually go through life and enjoy it more without worrying about what happens when a pandemic hits. It's really tough. So I'm not saying quit your job. I'm saying that if you see that this is going to be a real big problem in the future, then bide your time, do the best job you can, but always keep your options open. Look at other universities, find out if there are other positions that are at a more liberal school, more liberal departments, more understanding departments, and supportive departments. Because that's a big part of promotion and tenure. You need to be supported by the department and by the university. And once you find that, then go and apply for that position. And one other thing I must commend you on is finding out what the RTP, or Retention, Tenure, Promotion policy is for your department and for university. You know already what you're getting into. And I do that before I take the job. You may have done it as well. But I always do that. And I know in my last job, I made sure there was an addendum on my contract of employment that basically said that it was understood that I would be working outside the university and I would not get any pressure for doing that. So I protected myself in my contract. I don't know how possible it is to do that anymore. I mean, that was like 25 years ago. So I would highly recommend everyone look at the retention, tenure, and promotion policy of your department and of the university before you accept the job. Steve, how about you?
Well, I think that's good advice. So I've only got like a few things to say. So the university hired you because they thought you could do the job. So that means that you probably have a good pedigree, you have a decent portfolio, and they believe in you. All right, so it's time for them to pony up now. You go to the department chair and you say, hey, I noticed that I need to be working at Lort Theaters. Well, Lort Theater season is usually October to May, which is the school season. You need to get time off to go do that show. And that's not even enough because your university is asking that you work in a Lort Theater. That chair needs to get on the phone. And I don't know, pick almost any state has a Lort Theater. So that chair needs to get on the phone and say, look, we have a relationship with a theater, or we'd like to build a relationship with a theater. We have a young man or woman here who is a good designer. What's it going to take for you to bring in my faculty member to design this show? It's already, if you do have the kind of chops to do it, it's already a good deal for the Lort Theater because they're saving probably on travel, hotel, and per diem. Mm-hmm. But someone needs to help you, and that's the job of the department chair. Also, one of the things I found when I first started was, people were generous in giving me time off, but I was really surprised. I started at a Research One school before I came to SMU, and I was stunned. I saw the dean one day, and I said, I've got this opportunity to go to Europe, but I'd have to be gone for 3 weeks. And he looked at me and said, not a problem. And actually, at that particular school, Research One, they were giving up to, it had to be a pretty big project, but they were giving science and engineering faculty up to 8 weeks off to pursue something outside the university. Mm-hmm. And again, this wasn't, something small. This was pretty big projects. But at that type of school, they understood that time away from the classroom to pursue their areas of research was important not only for the faculty, but for the university and the students itself. So you might be able to tag into that. There may be a method by which you can get a couple weeks away. And it's not people staring at you wondering, what in the hell are you asking about? They understand it's a normal thing. So I would get the chair involved right now. And I'd say, okay, I want to do this. Here is our plan. Usually takes about 5 years to go up for tenure. How many LORT shows do I need to do to make you as a chair comfortable that I have met what you feel the standard is? If the chair comes back and says 2 LORT shows or 3 LORT shows, then he or she needs to work with you to line those up. And again, there's probably a LORT theater in your state that they have access to. That's all I've got. I think David summed it up nicely.
That's good.
You are listening to Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers, and Light Talk is sponsored by
the Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team. Are you tired of working for months on a show, making the lighting look great, only to return a few months after it opens and the lighting looks like crap? Or how about that multi-million-dollar architectural lighting project you designed a few years ago? And a few years later, you drive by the building and you see that the owners have changed half the lamps from 3200 Kelvin to 5600 Kelvin, all because they got a good deal for some cheap LEDs sold by Walmart. What's worse is when you discover that you have been featured, by no fault of your own, as the winner of this month's Light Talk Bad Architectural Lighting Award. It's not news that commercial theater producers are just downright cheap. Why pay for a maintenance call just because a few lights are no longer working, one gobo is out of focus, or a slipped shutter is projecting light all over a border? Those Yahoo rubes who paid hundreds of dollars for a ticket won't notice the difference. What we're talking about is a total lack of respect for your art. But once you leave town, there is little you can do to protect your show from looking like a bad high school musical. Until now. The Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team will assure that your lighting art lasts for years, or until you stop paying your monthly maintenance fee. The Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team is comprised of veteran influencers, aka Muscle, from New York and Chicago, people you don't want to ignore or piss off. They will pop in for a friendly visit with the producer to convince them that it is in the best interest of the show to fix those lighting problems before something unfortunate happens to the theater. When the producer agrees, which they will, the Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team will quickly mobilize the stage crew into an impressive labor force, quickly returning your show to its opening night glory. And all this for a very small fee, which may include some royalties from your piece of the show. So stop worrying about your colleagues telling you that your show looked interesting when you know that they are really questioning your artistic integrity. Hire the Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team to maintain your lighting designs. They will offer the producers a deal that they and you cannot refuse.
Not bad. Not bad. I'm trying to think of an anagram here. I can to get a word out of Focus Squad Mobile Lighting Maintenance Team.
No.
And does this team actually go aquatic also?
They will go wherever their paycheck takes them. Believe me. They will do anything that is necessary to get the job done.
Okay. So, I think we've tasted that casserole of nonsense. And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabid, sex-starved monkeys copulating on Stan's computer desk means that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about the problems of maintaining your show and what rights do you have once you leave town. That's right. The sponsor relates to Let's Talk About and relates to the cruise ship stories. So there you go.
Well, the first assumption here is that someone is actually texting you and saying, there's a problem with the show. All the blue gel's burned out. And that nighttime scene is now not.
This is a story from way back that I have. Paul Gallo, who lit a show on Broadway. And I knew Paul because he actually came to SMU when I was a grad student and lectured. And I met him then. And I went to New York and I saw his show. And I'm sitting in the theater and I'm saying, oh my God, this is really strange looking. I mean, there were gobos, some of them were sharp focus. Some of them looked like the barrel actually fell all the way to the front of the light. So it was like a blob of light on the drop. And then there was these gobos that were like super crisp. And I said, there's no real color to this show. And I turned around and I looked at the balcony rail, and all the gel was burnt through, completely burnt through. I mean, there was no plastic there. It was like just big donut holes of light with the color around the edges. And I just said, this is unbelievable. And this is a major Broadway musical. And I saw him the next day, and I told him, I said, I really liked your show, but there's a real big problem. And I told him this, and he said, the show's been running for like 8 months, and they will not have a maintenance call. They will not pay for a maintenance call. Because it's exactly like the Focus Squad sponsor, most of the audience doesn't know the difference. They paid their, $300 to see the show, and they're sitting in there, and so Gobo's out of focus. I'm sitting watching Mamma Mia, and the same thing. One Gobo was sharp, one Gobo was really super out of focus. So I just think this is a big problem, and it's a big problem in architecture too. So what do you think, Steve?
I think it's odd because it's not a big problem in rock and roll. I mean, rock and roll, we have the money to change
right.
it. If we're using gel, we have the money to change the gel out. I've only noticed this problem at theater, and it can be a LORT theater or it can be a community theater. They all seem to have this kind of miserly touch when it comes down to fixing something. I came in to see one of my shows, and I was using a Source 4 Junior, and I thought, man, that thing looks weird. That thing just looks really bizarre. And instead of I think I had a 300-watt lamp in there. Instead of the 300-watt lamp, there's a 150-watt lamp in. And it was like, oh, yeah, we couldn't find what you used, but we had one of these in a bucket. Well,
and it fit the socket. So
that's right. Maybe it was a 300 instead of a 750, but it was just like, this is not even close to what should be in there. And that's why it looks so darn dark.
I've been very fortunate because in my career, at least the last 20 years, 30 years of it, you work with really good electricians, and an electrician will never allow that to happen. And I know I've seen board operators do exactly what I was surprised was not happening on the ship, basically saying, "Oh shit, that light is out of focus a bit. Maybe they didn't hit the trim correctly." Because sometimes in shows you change trims from scene to scene or act to act. And he actually made a live adjustment that moved the light so gently and so softly, I could barely see him make the correction. And I was very impressed. Good board ops will do that. They will do it because they know that someone may have screwed up or maybe the focus is out or whatever. They will fix it. I always talk to them about it. I tell them, I said, you have the liberty. You don't have to ask me permission. If you ever see something like this happen, and they go, yeah, we do that all the time. I said, great, I know you do. So just want to tell you that, that I'm okay with that. But when they don't do it, it's a problem. And a lot of times it is money. It is just people will not have a maintenance call because if it's an IA crew, of course you have to call in at least the minimum crew, all the heads. Right. And then you have to call in like 4 or 5 electricians if they're going up on a lift. It can be very expensive. I was talking to Stan about this yesterday, actually, because he was talking about how people just make changes in the specifications sometimes in architecture to save money. And he has very little power over that. And let's talk about power, Steve. I mean, what happens if someone tells you, your show on Broadway looks like crap because all the, the lights are breaking down and they're not restoring them. What power do you have? Does it say in your contract that you have the right to come in and say this art is not being maintained? I've never seen a contract that said that. No,
I haven't either.
And I don't think a producer would allow that to happen. Now, maybe people like Ken Billington or Hal Binkley, people, at that level of the profession, they can put stuff like that in their contracts. But most designers, I don't think that can happen. I don't think it happens. And it's frustrating because chances are we're out of there after opening night. And who knows what's going to happen at that show, after that. Now, thank God I've been working with a lot of, really good companies. Like, if there's a problem with the light, they will fix it. if they can, if they have the time, and they come in to do light check. If that pipe can come in, they can fix the light, they would do it. Otherwise, they lock it out of the show. And I would rather have lights locked out of the show than have them shaking or have the gobos not spinning correctly, which is, to me, the worst thing that could happen, because it takes the audience's attention away from the actors.
Or it's focused down in the orchestra pit now.
Exactly.
Or the third row from the balcony.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And again, that happens. Sometimes a light could slip and fall down into the audience.
It sounded like we need to get a producer on the show. We keep going, not just this. We have lots of questions for producers, and maybe they need a chance to say, well, hang on, guys, this is how it is.
Yeah, they need to be defended. Yeah,
right.
Okay.
We've got a couple people kind of lined up. One was a producer, and another is a Tony nominee.
There you go.
But we're waiting for you to get back from your next journey around. God, who's the guy? It's like, is it Phineas Fogg? His 80 days around the world?
No. After Prague, I'm back for a while. Don't worry about that.
You'll be calling us from Monte Carlo.
Oh, that's a pretty good idea. All right. Well, we would love to hear from our listeners if they've had issues with maintaining shows or having their shows destroyed by by bad maintenance. Right? It's bad enough that follow spot operators can destroy a show. Well, it's funny because going back to the cruise things, David Goodman, who is a wonderful, wonderful lighting designer and a very dear friend of mine, he used to do cruise ships back in the 80s and 90s, right? This was before moving lights. They had scrollers, right? And he would tell me when he designed a show, he would have like 30 scrollers in the show. And then when it came back to port about 6 months later, like 2 of the scrollers were still working.
Scrollers were like Satan. Everyone thought they'd be a good idea, but then they used them and went, oh, man.
But what really pissed them off was that the technicians knew how to fix them. They just wouldn't do it. Now, I think the cruise industry has changed a lot since those days. I think the level of the shows are much higher. I was really impressed with the level of the shows that we saw. Really impressed. And the lighting was great. The problem was, in executing it. That's all.
Okay, so you need a cruise ship representative on here. I don't know. So now I'm just making stuff up. I bet it's hard to do maintenance on a cruise ship.
Yes.
I bet because you probably can't get a ladder out.
Yeah, well they have catwalks.
The rocking of the show. They probably don't want you flying battens in, because I understand the battens, when they go out, they actually have clamps that lock them into position so they don't move around and shake. I bet it's harder than we give it credit for to maintain a show. Unless something like you have a catwalk, that's different.
All right, let's get a cruise lighting designer on the show. We need to get a cruise lighting designer on the show. And many of our friends are cruise lighting designers, so we will do that, because I think that would be a fabulous, fabulous discussion.
Yeah, we've never had anything like that on. Yeah.
The interesting thing is, again, they go out on these dry runs, right? They'll take the ship out before, and they'll run the show, they'll tech the show, they'll do all that stuff. And I'm watching the show with the shaky lights all over it. And I said, I know this designer saw that. They had to see that during techs. And why not move that gobo to a different lighting position that wasn't shaking? But maybe they all shake. You know what I mean? Maybe there is no such thing as a non-shaking lighting position and a vibrating lighting position. Yeah, let's get somebody on. I think that would be a really fascinating show for people. Cool.
All right.
You have the last question of the day, Steve.
Yes, it's Rhonda in New Mexico, and she says, I'm thinking about creating my own version of text analysis for undergrad designers. Can you give me any suggestions? I can give you 3 suggestions. Chekhov, Ibsen, and Shakespeare. Go with the masters. I think, this is an intriguing question, because a lot of people package their students off to the English department. I have nothing against the English department, but they're probably... That maybe should be their second stop after they've had a text analysis course taught by the theater department. I think it's a great idea. And I would say, if you're creating your own version of text analysis, go ahead and make it a text analysis design class. Put them all in there and turn them loose. And I don't know, you give them a couple plays that they should be able to handle. Romeo and Juliet and, I don't know, Count on a Hot Tin Roof. do text analysis, and then have them design scenery, lighting, and costumes for it based on what they've learned in text analysis, so they can take that text analysis and apply it to the design process. But somehow tie it. I think students have a hard time learning how to read a play. I think they have a hard time figuring out what rising and falling action is. I think they don't know what the climax is. I think we just assume that somehow the English departments and high schools across North America have taught them all this. So I think they're a little lost when they come into a text analysis class, or they come into a class where we are expecting them to understand what they're reading and how to deconstruct it. So yay, I think text analysis for undergrads taught by a theater artist would be a good thing. Just don't turn it into an acting class. Stick to your guns. Keep it being text analysis for undergraduate designers. Do you have any suggestions, David?
Judging from students, the level of education they're getting in high school nowadays, and their interest, I would think that the content would be the most important thing to look at. Choose good scripts and good stories that are relatable to the students. I would stay away from Shakespeare, personally. I'm not saying anything bad about Shakespeare. I just don't think, for the most part, that the students are able to get past the language to really understand what the show's all about. And because they're not trained. They're just not trained to do it. I mean, they don't know a lot of things about history and about dialects and all that. They don't know a lot about poetry, which is a shame. So I would find scripts that are more current and address issues that they care about, because I found that if you find the content interesting, you're going to really want to talk about it. Otherwise, they will just tune out in a second, totally tune out. So I just think that's a limitation, unfortunately, but one that must be addressed in our educational process.
Good point.
Yeah, it's difficult. In a way, I was talking to someone about this the other day, that I'm kind of happy that I'm retiring. My next semester is the last one, is because education is becoming so cheap now, especially with AI. A lot of people are using AI instead of a tool, which it is a wonderful tool. They're using it as a crutch. I think the essay is dead. I think that any teacher that uses essays now is just running a fool's errand, because a lot of students are cheating. They're just having ChatGPT write the essays. And I've taken all essays out of my classes for next semester. It's just a waste of time. And it's a shame, because writing essays trains students how to think critically. And that is probably the most important thing that you can do in education as a human being, is to be able to solve problems and master critical thinking. And if you lose that exercise, then I don't know what you're going to do. I guess ChatGPT will be solving all your problems.
It's also about communication. Yeah. And I've had students say, well, I don't want to, why should I bother writing? I can just go talk to the person, or I can send them a text. And that's true, but there's going to be a point where the conversation is going to be so complex that sending, 60 characters is not going to work. Calling them on a phone and talking about it's not going to work. You have to be able to organize your thoughts and convey them in a succinct manner. I just saw an interesting news blurb about someone who was using ChatGPT, and they were discussing in the paper itself. It was well written. It was a well written paper. But what they found when they really dug into it in this particular subject is that the AI had simply made up all of its references. It had created a fake bibliography to support what it had written. And everyone went, well, that's a problem.
That's a big problem.
It's a little bit of the Wild West right now.
Yeah, but they're going to fix all that. I mean, all that's going to be fixed. But anyway, it's a very challenging time. So everybody design on cruise ships. You'll have a great time. You can drink your 9 drinks a day and, hang out in the jacuzzi. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website at lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the Snoot Group with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase will defend these dweebs until their retirement funds are depleted. Don't with Snoot.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from the airport at Long Beach and the Republic of Texas.
Coming from the high seas. And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
Man, this feels like a ping pong game. I'm just not used
Let's
to
get
doing
Stan
two
back
people.
on the phone.
Yeah, get Stan to say this line. So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
All right.
That's funny.